Hello, my name is Mila Nikolova and I'm part of the Zyncro team. In this webinar, we'll look at how to develop integrations with Zyncro. First, let me briefly introduce what Zyncro is all about as a company and a product. Zyncro was set up in 2009 by Didac Lee, but it was officially launched on June 1st, 2010, when Louis Font joined the company as our current CEO. We are a young company that provides social networks for companies and private social networks. We have more than 100,000 users across the world, more than 500 corporate users, and more than 30 partners. We are currently in the process of major international expansion. We have offices in Japan, Mexico, France, and we're setting up in the Netherlands, Germany, and China, not to forget our presence in Spain. The product is available in 6 languages. During 2011, we released 8 new versions of the product and more than 20 ZyncroApps have been developed. So where is the problem? Why have a social network in your company? Beyond the company's walls, people use social networks in their daily lives: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social networks. But what happens when they cross the company's threshold? They are faced with a traditional intranet that has some useful features but is extremely boring, difficult to use, and limits the possibilities of collaboration and communication. Normally, access to other social networks within the company has been restricted, as they are considered tools that make the employee less productive. Social networks are frequently used in B2B companies, but B2C companies have been very timid in their adoption, giving them limited use. There are 2 main problems that arise within the companies. Often the way in which information flows within the company is not suitable, adequate. It does not flow correctly. In this example, we can see how the person at the top of the pyramid wants to communicate something to his inferiors, in this case a star with a sun. On the left, the message flows down correctly. Everything that he wants to say is transmitted. However, on the right side, the message becomes distorted. The message reaching to the bottom is completely different to what he wanted to communicate originally. On the other hand, within companies, people often work as groups or departments, yet collaboration is still being quite limited. Work groups don't collaborate with each other, or at least very infrequently. Other times, especially in large companies, people are unaware of what the other work groups or departments do. This limits communication and collaboration among groups. The solution. A report says that enterprise social networks will be the backbone of communications within 4 years. At Zyncro, we talk about being intoxicated. What does this mean? We are overloaded with information from too many communication channels like chat, social networks, blogs, RSS, etc. Zyncro's purpose is to organize this information flow into what we call the activity stream. What is the activity stream? Simply being able to see everything happening within your company at any given moment using the activity flow. This infographic shows all the main features of Zyncro, including microblogging on what is happening within the company, a file management system, a task management system, all the company's contacts, both internal and external ones. It's all structured into work groups. It also contains profiles, so you know who is who, their contact and personal data, their skills, etc. Then we have the company departments in order to arrange the organization structure. And we also have the extra applications, the so-called ZyncroApps, and integrations with social networks such as LinkedIn, Facebook, integrations with the cloud like Gmail Calendar and other cloud-based systems, or integrations with corporate systems such as SharePoint or SAP. If you haven't tried Zyncro, you should register and check it out. It's the best way to see how it works and discover all the features it offers. Zyncro can also be accessed from multiple devices. Apart from the browser versions, there are also versions for mobile devices, native applications for iPhone, Android, BlackBerry. There are also native applications for tablets, such as iPad or the Android tab. Well, that sums up briefly what Zyncro is. Now let's look at how to develop integrations within and with Zyncro. There are different ways of integrating using our APIs. We offer developers two APIs, a REST API and a JavaScript API. The REST API lets us integrate Zyncro in any application using the services created by this API for reading and writing on Zyncro, while the JavaScript API lets us integrate any application directly onto the Zyncro platform. Let's look at each of those in more detail. The REST API lets you create applications or websites that natively integrate with Zyncro. The REST API is a collection of web services, which means any modern programming language can call the web services securely. We use the OAuth protocol as an authorization mechanism to access those services. The services are called by HTTP, and messages are exchanged in JSON format. The REST API groups the different services, which are split up into different areas and into a subset of functionalities. There are services for accessing microblogging and activity stream, like getting the messages from the microblogging feature, posting new messages on the microblogging wall. We have others for managing groups, creating new groups, downloading, editing and uploading documents, managing group members, and anything to do with managing the organization and users by accessing the user profiles. There are services for managing users in an organization, editing user data, and also services for department management, creating new departments, downloading and editing department documents, managing department members. Also for managing inbox events, providing access to all user events and notifications, and finally, for managing invitations, sending invitations to new groups or external contacts, or accepting or rejecting invitations. You can find out more about these services in the API documentation, how they are called, what parameters they use, and their responses. The protocol used for authorization is the OAuth protocol. It is a standard protocol frequently used for API authorization. Many APIs like that of Twitter or Facebook use this protocol. The aim is to obtain what they call an access token in order to securely call the API services. To do this, there are three steps. First, get a request token, then the user must authorize this request token using their username and password. Then this request token is exchanged for an access token. This access token can then be used to call the API services. This slide shows an example calling the Zyncro's REST API services in Java. In this case, the service being called is to get the user profile through the URL shown here, my.sandbox.zyncro.com API v1 REST users profile. It is an HTTP service by GET. The request is generated and signed with an access token obtained previously, and the request is sent. The response obtained in JSON format shows the user profile with all its data, first and last names, email, etc., contact data, all the data found on a user's profile in Zyncro. We have a set of examples where you can see how to call Zyncro API services from different programming languages, as well as examples in C#, Java, PHP, Python, which can be accessed on the website. We are continuously adding new programming languages. Now let's take a look at a short example of how to call a Zyncro API service in the Zyncro REST API from Java. For this, we've used the same sample project in Java as that found on the Zyncro website. What we see is all the different OAuth protocol services in order to get the request token, then authorize that token, and then to get the access token for that authorized request token. In this example, first we get the user's microblogging stream. So we can compare it. I'm going to log on with my user. I'm signing into Zyncro, going to my account. Now we're going to call a Zyncro API service, which will return all this microblogging feed in JSON format. Here we have the code. Here we see the response. It's a string containing the last 10 microblogging messages. Each one is an element, a microblogging event. You can see what each attribute means in the Zyncro documentation. But the example we have here is "Hello from Zyncro's HQ", which is a private message. As you can see, it is the third message, and in the comments we can see "Hello from Zyncro's HQ". All the information can be found here. Now we are going to use another example. In this case, we are going to publish a message through the Zyncro API using another event. We're going to publish a message that says "Hello from the webinar". Using the Zyncro API, I call the service and it returns the response. It's been published. Here we have the message ID. Now if we go to the web and refresh, we can see that the message we published from the API was generated in Zyncro. "Hello from the webinar". These are two very simple examples of how to call REST API services from Java. You can go to the developer's portal, details given at the end, where you can find more examples in other programming languages, and you can play around with the API yourself, calling all the API services in REST. The other API that lets us integrate with Zyncro is the JavaScript API. The JavaScript API lets us integrate with Zyncro's website and add new elements and features to our front end, such as new sections, new menus, or buttons. The ZyncroApps are JavaScript modules that are loaded and integrated in our website. On a technical level, the jQuery library can be used. jQuery methods are available, and we also provide some JavaScript API methods that can be used to get information on the logged users, such as the session ID, the user ID, the organization ID, the user's language, or load scripts such as JS files or CSS style sheets. Now let's look at some examples of some areas of extension within the Zyncro front-end where ZyncroApps are loaded, such as the top menu or a button within the top bar. We can also add new panels in the sidebar. Here you have another example with ZyncroApps that give you personal statistics, a dashboard with statistic messages. Here we can see how a translate button is added to Zyncro within the Zyncro activity stream. All these are examples of ZyncroApps that have been developed for Zyncro. The personal dashboard also provides more information if you click on this button here, more details, which opens more information within Zyncro. Here we have more examples. For example, within the group section, in a group, a new tab has been added within the group. Another example is with the sidebar, or an example of a div within the Zyncro web. There are several sections within Zyncro where they can be added. What is the flow of a ZyncroApp? Browsers load the ZyncroApps, the JavaScript modules, from the server. If the ZyncroApp needs logic or to cause something to run, it does it through AJAX calls to the logic of the ZyncroApp, normally developed in PHP. Using a database, the ZyncroApp gets or saves information, calls external services, or calls the Zyncro REST API via HTTP calls. To develop with Zyncro, we give you access to the Zyncro Sandbox development environment. We have created a Zyncro account for you within our sandbox with up to 5 users and a gigabyte of storage space so you can develop and test any integration. To develop with the REST API, you need an API key to be able to call the services given to anyone who wants to develop integrations with Zyncro, as well as access to your own storage space. In other words, STFP access to a storage space on our servers where we can store all the files of the application being developed, from JavaScript, CSS, HTML to PHP files, and also access to a MySQL database that you can use to develop your app. So now let's look at a demo of what the JavaScript API does, so we see how it works. It's a very simple example. I've logged into my user account, in this case Sandbox, logging in with my user. Here we can see in the right panel there is a new panel called My ZyncroApp that says Hello ZyncroApps. This is an example of a ZyncroApp I'm loading. What we'll do now is to modify the JavaScript loaded here so we change the message being shown. First, we're going to connect to the storage space for this ZyncroApp. I'm going to connect it to it using FileZilla. In FileZilla, I'm going to configure the certificate. SFTP access is done using a PPK certificate. For example, when you register in Zyncro and want to develop an integration, you will receive a PPK certificate to access the storage server, which can be set up in FileZilla. Then, what I'm also going to configure is the access to Sandbox. The access I'm going to set is the host. This is the host DNS, here in this case us04.zyncro.com. The SFTP access and the user is Franco Scavuzzo, without a password, as it is not required since I'm using a certificate. Now I'm going to connect. I've connected to my extension server within Zyncro. Here we can see the public www folder. Within JS, the JavaScript currently being loaded to get this module is this one, francoscavuzzo.js. I'm going to copy it to my local drive and edit it there. Where it says Hello ZyncroApps, we change the name to Hola ZyncroApps. With the message Hola desde webinar. I'm going to save the file and then copy it once again to the server. Now I refresh the web. As you can see, the updated Zyncro app that says Hola desde webinar has been loaded. It is a very simple example of how to load a JavaScript to add a panel within the Zyncro interface. From here, more advanced functionalities can be added, such as an AJAX event that calls PHP services that are running on my extension server. This then can connect to a database. All this depends on the integration you want to develop. I can now also access my database as I'm going to show you now. In this case, I have a program called SQL Shop that is going to be connected. You will get a MySQL database too. The server is the same as before, us04n4.zyncro.com. The user is Franco Scavuzzo. Now I've connected. I'm going to have my database where I can create my tables so that the ZyncroApp I'm developing can use it where necessary. This was a very simple example of a ZyncroApp. You can find more information on the Zyncro developers portal, developers.zyncro.com. There you'll find documentation on the REST and other examples. It contains all the methods available for the API and their parameters, as well as how to call them, what each parameter does, and their responses, as well as more examples of Zyncro apps implemented with the JavaScript API, a small kit consisting of guides and best practices for developing Zyncro apps, and the examples mentioned previously. If you have any questions or queries, you can write to Franco at zyncro.com and he will try to answer them. That's it for this webinar. I hope you've been able to get a general idea of how to go about developing integrations with Zyncro. Until the next time,